Hi, everybody. Happy 2025 and welcome back to Dance Teacher Pep Talk podcast. I am really looking forward to today's episode, and I just wanted to start off by saying if it sounds windy in the episode, it is a very windy day here, and I tried whatever I could to kind of eliminate that background. Hopefully, it will last through the episode. Anyways, today's episode is all about intention setting, but it's going to be a little different than I'd say your typical intention setting. And of course, being the beginning of the calendar year, I wanted to start off this way because I think that we're all in this headspace, or we are all being bombarded by this idea of making your New Year's goals, or what are your New Year's resolutions? And, we may do this in our personal life, but as I mentioned previously on other podcast episodes, I think it's so important that we do this as well for our teaching, and not only making goals, but reflecting on those. And so, yes, today's episode is all about intention setting, but I'm actually going to change that word around. So a lot of the time you hear the word intentions, resolutions, goals. But this year, I want us to kind of look at the word promise, because as I was getting ready to record this episode, the word promise to me felt so much stronger. And it held so much more importance because, as I mentioned, these intentions are going to be a little bit different than, say, like the typical ones. But I think they're going to really help us in our dance teaching careers and, just to keep us in a new wavelength of thought as we start this year. So a promise, when we think about a promise, I put it into like the respect or, connotation of like if you were to promise a friend something versus if you were intending to do something for a friend. To me, the promise sounds like it is going to be fulfilled so much more than something that is intended to do. And I think about that word and, when we stand by promises for ourselves, people can feel more confident in us because we are more confident in us. If you stand by your word, there's trust. Or, if somebody that stands by their word, there's trust with them. So if we do that with ourselves, we build self-trust, we build confidence, and in a way, people will gravitate towards that more. Students, things like that, they're going to believe in you because you believe in yourself. And, this for us, January, is really like the mid-year mark in our year. So a lot of the time we're setting our intentions and our goals for the year in September, or the start of the dance year. And, that's wonderful. But now I think is a time not necessarily to like make new goals, but to reassess the goals that we have and look at what's really important to us. So like, what are we promising of ourselves for our students? What are we promising to do in our careers, in our dance teaching environments, so that they can have this confidence in us that like we are propelling ourselves forward in what we said we were going to do this year. And that's going to help them see like that we believe in them, and so that they will also continue their goals that they have set for themselves. If we're setting up the structure in our classes so strongly for them, I feel that in turn, they will also feel that motivation for themselves. So like I said, this might not be the time of year where you're setting new goals, but I think it's a great time to reassess. It's an evaluation. How far along am I with the intentions and goals that I had set in the beginning of the year? And where do I need to go from here? Some of those goals might not apply anymore. Some of the goals may still apply, and some of the goals may need some editing. And that is just, I think, such an important part of teaching, is that we can change and, edit our goals to fit the needs of the students best. And I think that if we don't do that, we're just kind of teaching at, like a surface level. We're not getting into the depth of what is needed or necessary. And so I think it's a great time to evaluate. But along with this, I think there is room to kind of change up some of the wordage on our promises. And so today I thought about 4 promises that I tend to do, but I need to remind myself of going into this year, or this new year of 2025, I should say. And I'm hoping that they will also inspire you and help you to look in your own goals, in your own intentions, where this may be needed or where you may want to do things differently. So the first promise that I am setting out to accomplish in 2025 is to simplify. Now, that's the first one. Simplify. In so many ways, I tend to overcomplicate things. I overplan, overprepare, and then, you could say that's a good thing, but when I look back, I see the time that I had put into all of that, and I think about what else I could have done with that time. So we're talking about efficiency here. We're talking about making the most of our time. So if we are simplifying, we have more space for inspiration to come in. We have more space for spontaneity to come in. And I think that is hugely important in our teaching. Again, it's the difference between being a surface level teacher and a teacher that reaches in depth. If anything, becoming a mother has taught me, it's that you can do so much more when you do less. And as, also a Pilates instructor, like a huge part of that too is quantity is not the goal. It's quality over quantity. So like if you've ever taken a Pilates class, you may notice that you don't do a bunch of reps in a particular exercise in the series that whether it's mat, apparatus, or anything like that. It is the quality. So you could do 5 of these really well, and that is more important than doing 10 of them not as well. And so when I was thinking about this and looking at my teaching, quality over quantity is something I want to tackle in my classes too, because, if I have all of these ideas and all of these plans for my class, I might not even get to the heart of the matter because I'm just thinking of all the stuff that has to be done. So I think having less and focusing on less is actually going to give us more in the end. Simplifying can help yourself. It can help your students. It really doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be this over-the-top stuff, and it doesn't have to be hard all the time for ourselves. We don't have to be putting all this pressure on ourselves. I think that we can get to the point and get to what is most important while still challenging, yes, but not at the expense of overwhelm. Because if we're overwhelming ourselves, we're going to be tired before we even hit the classroom that day, before we even get into the classroom that day. So we need to make sure that we are fresh and ready to go. Teaching in the moment, I talk about it a lot. It has a really great it's really, I think, really, really important is to teach in the moment. I don't even know what word to put with it, but I think that, if we put so much pressure on ourselves, we'll get into the classroom and panic when we don't get it all done. And also too, there's that fear though of what if we don't have the plans and we're going into the class? What are we going to do? Well, the students are in front of you. The energy is in front of you, and hopefully have your syllabus or your framework that you had created in the beginning of the year, and you can work off of that. But it also comes down to like what is necessary in that moment. So if you need help or ideas on syllabus building, I do have an episode, which I'll link in the show notes. But having a framework is so, so important. So for me, the way that I'm going to simplify is I'm going to look at January to June, and I'm going to think about how do I want to fulfill all of what I set out to do. I'm going to create a timeline, sort of like a rough framework, to follow from now until the end of the year. That way, I'm not scrambling day to day, figuring out what I need to do. Okay, so like I actually ended up doing this for my maternity leave because, I wasn't going to be there. So I needed a plan in place, knowing that for this amount of time when I was away, these are the things that would get done so that when I get back, I was still on track within my framework. And it made such a smooth comeback for me that I want to continue it for myself through the season of the year, through the rest of this year. And I think reflection, like I said, is really important. And I know that the timeline and framework may change, but I feel that having that is a really good place to begin. So like maybe, for example, I'm taking a look at the first week back and getting back. This is going to be just like a reevaluation of skills after the holiday break. Next week, maybe I'm going to start in adding these new skills that we were working on the building blocks for in the previous week. Maybe this week, I'm going to make sure that we get combination in, and maybe this is going to be a week where we're talking about performance goals, things like that. So just an idea, like a base structure, so that when I go in, I know what I'm ready to do. And hopefully by this point too, you have your warm up, you have everything ready to go. So it really is just going in a simplified manner and really focusing in on things that really matter to you. So let's see. Number two. Number two, I think, is a really common one to have as an intention, promise, or resolution. And that is giving back to our bodies. This should seem like a given as a dance teacher, but honestly, I don't think it is a given because there are so many times I put my body last to make sure that I gave to others first. We always say to our students, listen to your body. This is your tool, all of this. Prioritize healing with injuries. How many times do we say this? But how many times do we do it for ourselves? And it's hard when we have this type of career where we're going, and maybe you feel that's enough, like your dance teaching is what's giving back to your body, but it's not the concentrated time that you have on yourself. And when I say giving back to our body, I don't mean just like physically making sure that we're exercising or doing things that help us to strengthen. I mean also giving back to ourselves mentally, soulfully, however you want to look at that. So it is not just about making sure you're getting a workout in. That is not at all what I mean by this. But I do feel when I show up for myself and give movement to myself, I feel stronger. I feel more centered. I literally feel like more together so that I am able to be on for my students mentally, soulfully. I make sure that I do the things that are really important and helpful to my mental health, self-care, all of that stuff. Even drinking water these days for me, like some days I will even be like, wow, it's noon. Have I had enough water yet? Something as like basic necessity as that. And so it's important for me to set up systems so that I know I am doing the best that I can for my health, mentally, physically, in all ways. Even making sure that I'm bringing snacks to work. Sometimes that third class comes around, I'm doing the warm up and I do like a release forward and I roll up and I'm thinking, whoa, I need to make sure that I have a snack because this is a long night and I need to continue to fuel my body for success, just as I encourage my students to do as well. So giving back to your body right now looks a little different for myself through this whole like postpartum recovery type of era that I'm currently in, but I make it happen, and it's so funny because I definitely prioritize sleep as much as I can, because when you don't have that much sleep, you try to get as much sleep as you possibly can. But what I've noticed is on the days that I decide, okay, at the last middle of the night feed, like the early morning feed, I will get up and I will get going. I'll do some movement for myself. And that way I know it gets done, because if we say, oh, I'll get my workout in later or something like that, it might not actually happen. So if you wake up and you have the time, just see what it's like to move. And I love the book, The 5 a.m. Club by Robin Sharma. I think I shared about it in a Books Inspired podcast episode once. But it's such a good one because it really showed me that it's so much more than just the exercise. It's preparing yourself for success, for the life you want to have, and for the day that you have ahead. So that's a great book. I definitely recommend if you're looking for something to kind of kickstart your morning journey, if you will. All right, let's see. Now, number three. Number three is do it scared. I have seen this phrase somewhere, and I apologize. I don't know where I saw it, but it really stuck with me. Do it scared. Because I think about the things that have pushed me the most, maybe evolved me the most. And there have been elements in all of those times that I was scared, that I felt nervous, that I had apprehension about what I was going to be doing. Putting the podcast together, that was the scary thought. The twin pregnancy in and of itself, finding out that I was having twins, that was a scary thing, but it has pushed me. They are big things, yes. It is putting myself out there, thrown into massive growth, but that is how we evolve. And when we're setting intentions and when we're setting promises for ourselves, the whole point of that really is for our evolvement. It's getting us to the next step of where we want to be. And if we just play small, we'll stay small. So being scared is, scary, but it helps to propel us to the next level. So, where are you next going to take the leap to? With your voice, your career, your craft. I personally feel like this do it scared intention for myself or promise for myself. This one applies more to the podcast than maybe it does to my teaching. But, if it does apply to my teaching, maybe it's putting myself out there more. Maybe, starting looking for summer opportunities earlier, putting myself out there, getting my voice out, because that's scary to put yourself in, putting yourself out there and marketing yourself and to new places and new people. But what is there to lose if you don't try? And for me, like I said, this applies more, I think, for the podcast, but building and growing the podcast is huge for me. I'm not in necessarily the space or place to be doing more interviews at this time right now, because the solo recording works really well for me because I can do it on my schedule. But I know that within the next few months, I want to work on building and growing this podcast more. I want to reach more. I want to be connected to more. And that's a big goal for me. And that to me is a scary thought, but it is something that I know will propel me further. Okay, lastly, number 4. This is a really, I think, important one just for our human lives in general, and it is expand your knowledge. When you take on something that is new, I feel a lot of the time it automatically creates inspiration and spark that was not there before. It's like, that feeling when something just lights you up and you just feel so inspired. For me, expanding your knowledge is enriching your life. And when we enrich our life in many ways, it can enrich your teaching. So it could be workshops. It doesn't even have to be dance related. Maybe you want to go to convention one weekend and that lights you up. Maybe you want to take a course. And like I said, it doesn't even have to be dance related. There are so many courses online these days. You can find ones for free. You can find ones that are paying. But by taking these things, and some of these courses, I should say too, or maybe it's an hour commitment, maybe it's a few hours commitment, maybe it's like a couple modules or things like that. But when we're doing this, it brings so much to our lives. And when we have that in our lives, we automatically bring it into the classroom. I have done a variety of courses over the years, paid and non-paid, that I have found propelled me in my career so much. I took a course about virtual assisting because I was at one point really into that idea, and I haven't necessarily put that out there or put that away. If maybe someday that'll be something that I'm going to do, but the topics and the discussion and the things that I learned within the virtual assisting course, I immediately applied to the job that I have as a competition team coordinator. So it's very interesting how courses, even if they're not dance related, the skill set within them can really enrich what you're doing within your other jobs and your career. Maybe it's a writing course, maybe it's a singing course. Well, who knows? Whatever it is, expanding your knowledge, I think, is just so important. Again, it has to do with your involvement, your pushing forward. And, with all of these, so again, just refreshing. So I have simplify, giving back to our bodies, doing it scared, and expanding your knowledge. Those are the 4. And along with all of those, presence is always important to me. I've mentioned it before. I will say it again and again. Presence, so important. Connection is important to me. But these are things that I feel are going to push me and grow me in the season. And also remind myself that it starts with me. That the class that I teach is only as good as I am for myself. And I just feel that so much will deepen for me when I simplify, when I give back to my body, when I do it scared, when I expand my knowledge and I put them into motion. And I think that is all going to segue directly into my class. And it's going to bring new thoughts, new ideas, inspiration for that classroom experience. So not only is it bettering myself, but it's bettering my students. And I hope that some of these ideas will inspire you as well as you begin this new year of 2025. Because yes, we have set ambitious goals for ourselves at the beginning of the year, but yes, do some evaluation and also think about what more can you do to progress yourself, to evolve. And I don't mean necessarily we need to be hustle and going all the time, because I know I'm not in a season of life like that for myself, but I know there are things that I can do to continue to evolve, even if it's just a slower pace at this particular time in my life. And yeah, there are going to be seasons in my life where I am going to be able to hustle and push, but I know that this is not the time, and I'm just going to do all that I can. So I want to say that too, because if you're not in that season, there are still things that we can do that will make ourselves to feel better. And I think at the end of the day, when we set intentions for ourselves, that's what we're doing. Is we're trying to help ourselves to feel the best version of ourselves that we can be. And I hope that you all have an incredible year ahead. I hope that it is one of fulfillment, evolvement, enjoyment, happiness, and more. Like, I really, truly feel that. So taking this month, taking this time to really think about, what do you want to set out to do this year? And maybe starting to put the goals together of how you're going to get there. So I hope you all have a beautiful rest of your week. I'm so excited for the month ahead with Dance Teacher Pep Talk. I have some really different topics that I'm going to be bringing here to the podcast. And I, as always, appreciate your listens and appreciate your support so very much. Make sure to follow me on Instagram at Dance Teacher Pep Talk, and we'll talk again real soon.